My ex-wife demands I finance her 5 kids. I only pay for my twins. Now she's back begging for money for a house and calls me selfish. But I held my boundaries and she never expected me to say no for 8 years straight. I'm 34 years old, work as a software engineer, and I need to tell this story because after 8 years of dealing with this, I finally managed to establish boundaries that work, but the road to get here was exhausting. Basically, my ex-wife decided at some point that I should be financially responsible for her entire new family, not just our twins. And when I say her entire family, I literally mean all the kids living under her roof, regardless of whether I share DNA with them or not. But I guess I should start at the beginning, when Rachel and I were a couple and things were much simpler. Rachel and I met in college, like early 20s, and everything was pretty normal at first. We dated for about 3 years, got married, and honestly I thought things were going well, until she got pregnant with twins. I don't know exactly what happened, whether it was the stress of pregnancy or what, but we started fighting a lot, about anything, and when the babies were born things just didn't get better. We tried to make it work for the kids, you know? That whole story everyone sells you about having to stay together for the children. But after like 6 more months, we realized it was worse for everyone to keep going like that. So, we separated when the twins were barely a year old. And honestly, at first it was pretty amicable. Like we sat down and said, look, this isn't working, but we can be good parents separately, right? And for a while, it worked perfectly. We established a shared custody agreement, 50-50, and I paid child support that covered my fair share of their expenses. We communicated well about the kids, coordinated schedules without problem, and could even be in the same room without drama. The twins, Emma and Liam, they were like 2 years old when we really got into the custody routine, seemed to be adjusting well, or at least as well as kids that young can adjust to having 2 homes. I lived in a 2-bedroom apartment not too far from Rachel's house, like 15 minutes by car, so it was easy for exchanges and school logistics when they started preschool. Things stayed stable for about 2 years, until Rachel met Anthony. He had a daughter from a previous relationship, Sophia, who was exactly the same age as the twins, which in retrospect should have been a red flag for me. But at the time I didn't think anything of it. Rachel was happy. I was happy that she was happy because it meant less tension overall, and the kids seemed to get along well with Anthony when they met him. They got married pretty quickly, like after a year of dating, and Anthony and Sophia moved into Rachel's house. I was fine with all this, honestly, because Rachel had the right to rebuild her life, just like I had the right to rebuild mine. But then the weird expectations started. At first it was subtle, like Rachel would casually mention that when I took Emma and Liam to the movies or the park, why didn't I also take Sophia? Because, she would feel left out if her siblings, technically half-siblings, went out without her. And I'd tell her, Rachel, I take out my kids because they're my kids. I have no problem with Sophia, but she has her own father, right? And Rachel would say yes. But that Anthony worked a lot on weekends, and it would be nice if all the kids could spend time together as a family. And there was that word, family, which would become the central argument of all our conflicts for the next several years. At first I gave in a couple of times. Like, okay, if we're going to something big like the zoo or a festival, I guess Sophia can come. It's not a big deal. But then the expectations grew. Rachel started expecting that if I bought something for Emma, I should buy something equivalent for Sophia. If Liam received a birthday gift from me, Sophia should also receive something when it was her birthday, even if her birthday was in a completely different month. When they turned 6, I wanted to throw the twins a special party. Like, I rented a space at a trampoline gym and everything, and Rachel told me that either I included Sophia with her own group of friends or I better not have the party because it wasn't fair to her. And the thing is, I understood where she was coming from. In theory. You know what I mean? Like, yes, the kids live together, and it must be hard for Sophia to see her half-siblings receive things from their father when she doesn't have that same relationship with her own dad, who apparently was pretty absent. But at the same time, I wasn't Sophia's father. I had no legal or moral responsibility toward her beyond being polite and respectful when I saw her. I was already paying child support, fulfilling my obligations, and doing my part as a father. It wasn't my job to compensate for Sophia's absent father, or for the fact that Anthony supposedly didn't earn as much as I did. So I drew a line. I told Rachel, "Look, I understand you want a home where all the kids feel equal, and that's fine. But you can't expect me to finance or manage that equality. My resources, my time, my emotional energy go toward Emma and Liam because they're my children. Sophia has parents who can do that for her." And Rachel got angry, like really angry, saying I was being selfish and that I didn't understand what it was like to raise a blended family. She accused me of emotionally damaging Sophia by treating her differently than the twins, as if it were my responsibility that a 6-year-old girl didn't feel jealous of her half-siblings. After that conversation, our co-parenting relationship changed. We were no longer friendly. We switched to what I later discovered is called parallel parenting, where you basically minimize contact with your co-parent and only communicate about what's strictly necessary. Kid exchanges became tense. Conversations about school or health were brief and by text, and any flexibility we'd had before disappeared. If I needed to switch a weekend, Rachel would say, no, automatically. If she wanted me to take the kids on her time, I'd say no. It became a very transactional and cold relationship, but honestly, it was better than constantly fighting about what she expected me to do for her extended family. Then Rachel and Anthony had a baby together. A girl, Mia, which meant that now Emma and Liam had a half-sister from both sides biologically. I was happy for them, honestly. A baby is always something nice. But I was also worried because I knew this was going to further complicate Rachel's expectations. And I was right. Almost immediately after Mia was born, Anthony's nephew, a 7-year-old boy named Tyler, came to live with them because apparently there were problems with his mom, and he needed a stable home. So now in Rachel's house there were 5 children: Emma, Liam, Sophia, Tyler, and baby Mia. And Rachel was completely overwhelmed. She started asking me for favors more frequently. Could I babysit Sophia and Tyler along with the twins on a Saturday because she needed to rest? Could I buy diapers for Mia because they were short on money that month? Could I pay for swimming lessons for the 4 older kids because it would be good for them all to learn to swim together? And each time I said no, and each time she told me I was selfish, that I didn't care about the children's well-being, that I was putting money above family. But I saw clearly what was happening. She had made decisions to expand her family, decisions that Anthony and she made together, and now they wanted me to subsidize those decisions. And that simply wasn't going to happen. The twins were 8 years old, Sophia also 8, Tyler 9, and Mia about 2, when the school trip moment arrived. The school organized this incredible educational trip to Washington, D.C. for the combined 3rd and 4th grade classes. Like a whole week, hotels, museums, monuments, the whole American experience, and it was expensive, like $1,200 per child, not counting extra money for souvenirs and additional meals. But Emma and Liam were super excited. They talked about it every day, and I wanted them to go. So when the school sent the forms and payment information, I immediately said yes, that I would pay for their part. Rachel called me like 2 days later and said, "Okay, so you're going to pay for all 4 kids, right?" And I said, 4? No, I'm going to pay for Emma and Liam, obviously. And she said, "Well, Sophia and Tyler are also going to go. They're in the same classes, and it wouldn't be fair for Emma and Liam to go and them not to." And I told her, "Rachel, that's almost $2,500 additional dollars. I'm not going to pay for other people's children to go on a school trip." And she exploded, like screaming on the phone about how could I be so cruel, that these kids were siblings, that they lived together, that they went to the same school, that it would be devastating for Sophia and Tyler to stay behind while their siblings went on this incredible adventure. I told her I understood it was a difficult situation, but that Anthony and she needed to find a way to pay for Sophia and Tyler if they wanted them to go. That I was already paying my fair share for my kids. She said they didn't have an extra $2,500, that they were barely surviving with 5 kids, that I earned more money than them, and I should help. And I told her that my higher salary wasn't her ticket to ask me to pay for children who weren't my responsibility. She hung up the phone, furious. The next day, Anthony called me. It was weird because he and I never talked directly. Everything was always through Rachel. He tried the guy-to-guy approach, saying he understood my position, but could we find a middle ground? Maybe I paid for Sophia and they paid for Tyler? Or we split the cost of all 4 kids somehow? And I told him, Anthony, with all due respect, you and Rachel decided to have this large family, decided to bring Tyler into your home, which is admirable, but those were your decisions. I can't be financially responsible for the consequences of those decisions. He tried to argue that the twins would feel bad going without their siblings, and I told him that was something he and Rachel needed to handle with the kids. Help them understand that different families have different resources, and that's okay. Honestly, I thought that was going to be the end of the conversation, that Rachel and Anthony were going to figure out how to handle the situation, maybe borrow money or make a payment plan with the school, or simply explain to Sophia and Tyler that this year they weren't going to be able to go. But Rachel didn't stop. She sent me like 20 text messages in the following days, each more desperate and angry than the last. She accused me of favoritism, of wanting her other kids to suffer, of being a terrible father who only cared about blood. She told me that Emma and Liam were going to resent me when they realized I had caused their siblings to stay behind. Then she asked me to meet in person to talk. I agreed, thinking maybe we could have a calm and rational conversation face to face. We met at a diner on a Wednesday night, without the kids, just the two of us. And basically it was an hour of Rachel trying to convince me using every emotional tactic in the book. She cried, saying she felt like a terrible mother for not being able to give all her children the same opportunities. She said, I didn't understand how hard it was to manage a blended family, that she was doing the best she could with limited resources, that she was just asking for a little help from someone who could afford it. And part of me felt bad, because I could see she was genuinely stressed and overwhelmed. But at the same time, I didn't create this situation. I didn't decide they should take in Tyler. I didn't decide they should have another baby when they were already financially tight. And most importantly, I was already contributing to Emma and Liam's support beyond what the custody agreement required sometimes. I bought them extra clothes when they needed it, paid for their extracurricular activities, made sure they had everything they needed at my house. It wasn't like I was being stingy with my own children. I told her all this as gently as I could. I said, Rachel, I understand you're in a difficult position, but you can't expect me to be the solution to that position. You and Anthony are adults who made adult decisions about the size of your family, and with those decisions come financial responsibilities. I cannot and will not be an ATM for your household. She got angry again, saying I was being impossible, that any decent person would help in this situation, that I was hurting innocent children by being stubborn. I paid the diner bill and left feeling exhausted and frustrated, but Rachel still wasn't done. The next few days, I started receiving calls and messages from her family. Her mom called me, telling me I was being unreasonable and cruel. Her sister sent me a long message about the importance of family and all children feeling equally loved. Her brother sent me a text saying I was an idiot and should be ashamed of myself. It was like a coordinated campaign to make me feel guilty and make me change my mind, and it was intense. I barely knew these people, like I saw them maybe once a year at the twins' birthdays or something. And now they all had strong opinions about my finances and my parenting decisions. I ignored most of the messages, but eventually I had to block Rachel's brother because he was getting aggressive. Rachel's mom kept calling for like a week, until I finally answered and told her very clearly that I appreciated her concern, but this wasn't her business and she needed to stop contacting me. She cried and said she was just trying to help her daughter, and I told her the best way to help her daughter was to stop pressuring me and maybe help her financially herself if she was so concerned. After that, she stopped calling. The deadline to pay for the trip was approaching, and I had paid for Emma and Liam, but obviously hadn't paid for Sophia or Tyler. Rachel called me one last time, like 3 days before the deadline, and her voice sounded different, calmer, but also colder. She said, Matthew, this is your last chance to do the right thing. If you don't pay for these kids, you're going to destroy this family, and Emma and Liam will never forgive you for making their siblings feel less than. And I told her, Rachel, I've made my decision. It's not going to change. I'll pay for my children. You need to figure out how to handle your children. And she said, fine, But don't say I didn't warn you about the consequences," and hung up. That night, I couldn't sleep well. Honestly. I wondered if I was being too harsh, if I should just pay the money to keep the peace, if the twins were really going to resent me for this. But then I thought about the precedent it would set, you know? If I paid for this trip, what would be next? Should I pay for music lessons for everyone? For Sophia and Tyler's college eventually? Where would it end? And I realized that if I didn't hold my boundaries firm now, I was never going to be able to hold them. The text messages and calls from Rachel's family stopped after that last conversation, which was a relief, honestly. The next few weeks were weird because I knew the trip drama was there, like pending, but nobody was talking directly about it with me. When I had the twins at my house, they mentioned the trip with excitement, talked about what they were going to pack and which monuments they wanted to see, but didn't mention Sophia or Tyler not going, so I figured Rachel hadn't told them anything yet, or had given them some explanation. They accepted. Like a week before the trip, Emma casually asked me if Sophia and Tyler were also going to be on the trip, and I told her honestly that I didn't. No, that was something her mom and Anthony were deciding. She said, "Oh, okay," and kept talking about something else. Liam didn't ask anything, and I realized that maybe Rachel had been exaggerating how much the twins cared about whether their half-siblings were going or not. Like, yes, they lived together and got along well, but they were also 8 years old and mainly excited about their own adventure, not necessarily thinking deeply about family fairness. Turns out Anthony and Rachel found a way to pay for Sophia. I don't know if they borrowed money, or if Rachel's family put up money after all, or what, but Sophia ended up going on the trip. Tyler didn't go, and honestly, I don't know what the official reason they gave him was, whether it was financial or if there was another reason, but he wasn't on the trip. And the twins went and had the time of their lives. They sent me photos from one of the chaperones' phones, like standing in front of the Lincoln Memorial at the Smithsonian, eating at a fancy restaurant, all smiling and happy. When they came back, they spent like an hour telling me everything about the trip, every detail, every joke with their friends, every interesting thing they learned. And at no point did they mention anything about Sophia not being there or about family drama. For them, it was just an incredible school trip they enjoyed. And I felt vindicated. I guess because it proved I had been right, that the kids could handle different circumstances, and the world didn't end just because not all siblings did exactly the same things. After the trip, Rachel and I didn't talk for like 2 months, except for brief messages about custody logistics. And then one day she called me, and I answered expecting another fight, but instead she sounded calm, almost resigned. She said, "You're right. I can't expect you to pay for all the kids." It was unreasonable of me to ask. And I was like, "What?" Because honestly, I didn't expect her to admit that. I asked her what changed her mind, and she said that Anthony and she had gone to couples therapy, and the therapist had helped them see they were putting unfair expectations on me, and they needed to handle their own finances without depending on my help. I thought, well, finally, maybe things are going to get better now. And for like 6 months, they did improve. Our communication was calmer. No weird demands, no pressure from her family. Kid exchanges were cordial. I kept doing my part with Emma and Liam, paying for everything they needed, spending my custody time with them, being a good father, and I thought we had reached an understanding. Then last week, Rachel asked me to meet again. She said she had something important to discuss. We met at the same diner, and she started talking about how her family was growing and how the house they lived in was getting too small. 5 kids sharing 3 bedrooms wasn't ideal. Mia was already 3 years old and needed her own space, basically. What you'd expect. And then she said, "Anthony and I are thinking about buying a bigger house, but we don't have money for the down payment, and we were wondering if you could help us with that, like as a loan or investment that we'd pay back over time." And I just looked at her like, "Are you kidding? After everything we went through last year with the trip, are you really asking me to put money toward a house where I don't even live?" And she got defensive immediately, saying it wasn't just her house. It was where my kids lived half the time. So I should have an interest in them having a good living space. And technically, yes, it was true that Emma and Liam would benefit from a bigger house at their mom's place, but that didn't mean it was my responsibility to finance that house. I told her very clearly. "Rachel, no, I'm not going to give you money to buy a house. You guys are adults with your own incomes and your own financial responsibilities. If you want a bigger house, you need to save for it or get a loan from the bank like anyone else. And she got frustrated and said I was impossible, that I always put my money before my children's well-being, that someday Emma and Liam were going to see what kind of person I really was. I just sighed, paid for my coffee, and left. I haven't talked to her since except for a text yesterday about a school event next week, and honestly, I'm at peace with everything. The last 8 years taught me that you have to maintain firm boundaries, especially with ex-partners who have constantly growing expectations. Emma and Liam are fine. They're happy and healthy kids who have everything they need and more. The fact that I'm not financing Rachel's entire extended family isn't damaging them. And if Rachel and Anthony want a bigger house, I hope they find a way to get it, but that way isn't going to involve my money. I already learned that lesson.